At Central University, we are not just giving theoretical knowledge, but also real-life practical immersion. Our projects and research are targeted at solving real-life problems within our built and a natural environment. My name is Che Joseph Bafo, an architecture student. The faculty and facilities available to us make us industry ready. The project I'm working on recently won an award when my colleagues and I visited the Netherlands. Central University makes you industry ready.
Good morning. Who do we have in the house? Krobo girls. Is it Krobodumase? Hey, that's where my mom comes from. I only understand the greetings. And then we have Obuase Senior High. Woo! And then we have St. Francis Xavier. Not to small but powerful. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. This is, I think, the third time I'm addressing the participants of the National Science and Math Quiz. And it's always a privilege to spend a few minutes with the best and brightest minds in the country. I wish you all very, very, very well. Today I'm going to share a few words with you on a special kind of greatness. I've been running my medical laboratory now for about 19 years. And I've picked up some lessons along the way. I keep telling my children, guys, what it took me 20 years to learn, I would like you to learn in 10 years. What it took me 25 years to learn, I'd like you to learn in 12 years. So I'd just like to share something that I have picked up over the years and which, as time goes on, I'm beginning to find is more and more important. It's something that you hear about a lot, but the actual practice of it is very beneficial, particularly for intelligent young minds like you. I have house help. I usually always have house help because I tend to get home very late and I don't have time for too much housework. And years ago, soon after I founded the lab, I had a problem with my son. I have 3 children, and my middle boy, at the time he was maybe 5 years old, this was about 2002, 2003, he had ringworm. And it was a very aggressive form of ringworm. And I'm somebody who likes to look very nicely presented all the time, and I like my children to look nicely presented. And here was my son with this ringworm and sightly patches on his scalp. We had to shave his head, and it was growing. The patches were growing. I was quite concerned about it, of course. Went to see the doctor. The doctor gave me some medication, which I applied religiously. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. This ringworm wasn't going. In fact, it was getting worse, and a couple of his classmates had got it as well. And I was at my wit's end. He was only about 5 years old, and he was taking medication. I think it went on for about 2 months, taking oral medication, and the ringworm was simply not clearing up. And then my house girl at the time said, "Oh, ma, now wait, could be what would the year be cool?" And I thought to myself, She was like, "Oh, me will be what would the year? Some not crowd, how would the drawing no crap ever call?" Normally, I probably wouldn't have paid attention to her, but because I had been giving this boy these tablets for so long and nothing had happened, I thought to myself, why not? Let's try it. So I said, "Dinah, bring it." So my house girl brought it, washed my son's hair with a soap every day, put it on his skin. Hey, 2-3 days later, I thought to myself, the skin looks as if it's normalizing. A week later, it had cleared completely. There was absolutely no trace of it. I could not believe it. I told myself, hey, wow, look at me with a postgrad in clinical biochemistry and molecular biology. And here's my house girl, GHS. I'm not sure whether she actually even finished GHS. And she was teaching me something about medicine. In fact, the results were so spectacular that the doctor who had prescribed it to me had a son, and that son was my friend. And that friend also had a son who had ringworm. So he said, his dad had been giving him medication. I said, my son's is gone. He said, what did you use for it? I told him. He began using it. He said, wow, this thing is very good. He and his wife were relocating to a foreign country. They asked me to buy them some stocks, extra supplies, just in case they go there and it comes back again, because they were so thrilled with the results. And that was quite a profound lesson for me in how everybody has got something to teach us. Now, when you think of greatness, if you think of a great person, what adjective comes to mind? What do you think of? Gentleman with a yellow pencil, what do you think of? When you are asked to describe a great person, what is an attribute? If you were to use one word to describe a great person, what would you? Someone who is successful. Okay. Anybody has another contribution? Young lady, first lady here with the glasses looking at the door. What would you think of? What would you think of when you say somebody is great? Somebody special. Think about somebody special, somebody successful. Can I have another contribution? Somebody who is worthy. Somebody who is worthy, special, successful. Can I have another contribution? Can I have another contribution? Okay, well, I get the idea. When you think about somebody who is great, you have in mind all sorts of special superlatives that you would use to describe the person. And in this day and age of bigging up oneself, where people want 1 million followers on Instagram and 1,000 likes to whatever you do, and people are wearing all sorts of T-shirts telling the whole world how amazing they are, humility doesn't seem to be something that people consider as being great. People, in fact, tend to think about humility as a weakness. They tend to think, when you use the word humble, people straight away think about somebody who perhaps is kowtowing to another person. They think about somebody who is perhaps not very wise, somebody who is poor in many respects, somebody who is weak and ineffective. But in fact, on the other hand, humility is one of the greatest characteristics that you will find in a person who is going to be a great leader. And when I'm talking about a great leader, I'm not talking about somebody who has 1 million followers today and then after the person dies, everybody forgets about them. I'm talking about the sort of leaders who, thousands of years after they have left the earth in physical form, still have people who adhere to their principles. If you were to take Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, he was a very humble person. If you were to read the accounts of the Prophet Muhammad, a very, very humble person. There was an account of him going out with his followers one day. They were very hungry, decided to slaughter a sheep. Somebody said, oh, I will kill the sheep. Another person said, oh, I will skin the sheep. Another one said, oh, I will chop up the sheep. And Muhammad said, I will gather up the wood to make the fire. His followers said, no. He said, I will. We will all sit down and eat this meal. Think about somebody like Buddha. Muhammad, for example, has, I think in the world there are about 7 billion of us, out of which 7 to 8 billion, out of which I think about 24% of the Earth's population are Muslims. And the original founder of this religion is a very humble person. You come to a person like Buddha. He was a wealthy prince who left everything that he had, just roaming around in search of self-enlightenment, shed all the earthly trappings of wealth, and yet garnered so many followers along the way. To this day, I think there are about maybe 500 million Buddhists in the world. And then Jesus Christ, I'm sure, is a personality that's familiar, you are all familiar with, performed a task that was considered to be something that was just for the lowest servants in the house, washing his disciples' feet. And when Peter spoke to him and said, Peter was not happy at all. Peter said, no, you can't wash my feet. And Jesus Christ told him, if I cannot wash my feet, if you will not allow me to do this, you cannot be my follower. He who would be greatest among you must be the least. So what is it about humility that is such a fundamental part of being a true leader? Now, I went to Motown, and our school song, I don't know whether anybody has ever heard the Motown school song. We're always singing it and annoying everybody. From Gambaga to Accra, should I sing it? Or I should spare you. But there's a part in our school song towards the end. The school song says, from Gambaga to Accra, from we also to Keta, we are brothers and our mother is our school. She will guide us all and each, so to learn that we may teach, so to subjugate ourselves that we may rule. Now when we were Motown, we just sang it, so to subjugate ourselves that we may rule, and sing the rule very loud. We were all very excited at the thought of ruling. But it's a phrase, it's to subjugate ourselves that we may rule. What is the meaning of to subjugate? Can anybody tell me what the meaning of subjugate is? Just give me a rough idea. Do you guys have phones? Or you don't have phones here? Somebody Google subjugate. Or somebody knows the meaning. Hey, science and maths quiz, guys. Sorry? It's what? But don't you use English for everything? Aren't your questions asked in English? Does somebody have an answer for me? Subjugate. Yes, ma'am. To control. Thank you. That's a good one. Anybody has another definition for subjugate? To conquer. Anybody else has another definition? Let's get a number. Yes. To dominate. Anybody else? Pardon? So we have to conquer, to somebody said to dominate. Another person said to do what? To subdue. So you get the general idea. Now to subjugate, our school song says to subjugate ourselves. It means to conquer yourself, to bring that pride in yourself down where it belongs. To put aside your wishes and your desires and your thoughts in order to listen to what another person has to say to you. Why is this important? Why is it important to subjugate yourself? Why is it important to be able to put your thoughts and your opinions aside just for some time and listen to what another person has to say to you? Let's go back in time. You guys are all scientists, so I decided to use sciences that everybody will know as an example. So, back in 15-something, as far as the whole world was concerned, the Earth was the center of the universe, and the sun and everything else revolved around us. This was the Ptolemaic, the Ptolemaic theory, which the church had bought, because as far as the church was concerned, it fitted very well into the biblical principles. Now here comes Galileo Galilei, who has been spending his time doing a lot in math and physics, pendulum, I'm sure you know everything that he did. And he had also constructed some telescopes with which he was studying the skies. Spent a lot of time, I think about 8 years or so, studying the skies. And he thought, Ptolemy is wrong. Yes, there are certain aspects of Ptolemy's theories which are right, the mathematical principles, but the central principle of the Earth being the center of the universe is wrong. It's the sun that is the center of the universe, and the Earth and several other planets in the entire universe revolves around it. And this was in support of work that Copernicus had done. Galileo's theory was received with a lot of wrath by the church. As far as the church was concerned, what do you mean? Everything that you say is violating the biblical principles, which states that the earth is the center of the universe, and the sun rises in the west and sets in the east and sets in the west. Everything revolves around us. Poor Galileo Galilei, under threat of torture, was actually forced to renounce his principles and was placed under house arrest, and he died under house arrest because the church refused to believe that the earth was not the center of the universe. Galileo Galilei had a heliocentric theory, the sun being the center. They were not prepared to believe it. Of course, 500 years down the line, we think, how stupid, how could you not have believed that? But that is what the situation was. I think about 200 years ago, somewhere in the 19th century, there was a Hungarian doctor, Nsmq. Has anybody heard of Nsmq? I know Galilei you all know about, but anybody heard of Semmelweis? He was a Hungarian doctor working in Vienna. He was an obstetrician. Everybody knows what an obstetrician is. Can somebody tell me what an obstetrician is? Obstetrician. Hey, St. Francis, what's an obstetrician? Yeah, number two, gentleman number two, you. What's an obstetrician? Oh, just general, it doesn't have to be the exact definition. Pardon? Well, anyway, an obstetrician is a doctor who deals with pregnancies and births and so forth. And this Semmelweis had noticed something. There were a large number of women who were coming into their hospital in Vienna to be delivered of their babies. Some of them had had complications during their pregnancies and so forth. Now, of the women who were coming to have their babies in hospital, a good 20 to 30% of them were dying. And the numbers seemed to be much higher than the numbers they were getting from people who were being delivered off at home or people who had midwives attending to them. Those who had doctors attending to them were dying at a rate which was about 20 times higher than the norm. And he decided he needed to investigate this. In those days, the doctors who performed the cesarean sections and so forth on women would also perform autopsies on women who had died during childbirth. So what was happening was the doctors would go in, perform the autopsies on the women who had died, and then from there they would go straight into the delivery room to go and help the women who were laboring. And he found there was a direct correlation between doctors in the mortuary and doctors coming into the laboring room. So he thought to himself, this was in the days before germs had been discovered. He thought to himself, there's something, either some fluid or some vapor or something, he didn't know what it was, that is on the hands of the doctors that is being transmitted to the patients. So he told the doctors, why don't we all wash our hands in chlorine? They washed their hands in chlorine. Within 1 month, the death rate had gone from, if it was about 30 women a month or 40 women a month dying, it was down to 1 to 2 women dying a month. This was drastic. There was a drastic drop in deaths. You would have thought that the medical facility at the time would have applauded him. On the contrary, they were very angry with him. How dare you suggest that we doctors who are meant to save people's lives are actually the ones who are killing people? He was subjected to a lot of vitriol, a lot of angry language. In the long run, he was relieved of his position at the hospital. And he was so upset, writing angry letters to everybody because he knew the evidence of what he was proclaiming, but he was not listened to. He ended up in a mental asylum where he died a few weeks later. Of course, now we all understand that germs are the cause of these things because later on, Pasteur and so forth were able to identify the germs, and it was very clear that the puerperal fever that the pregnant women were dying from was as a result of germs being transmitted from the mortuary to the delivery room. This is why we talk about subjugating oneself. You may have some preconceived notion of what things are, what things should be, but you could be wrong. Now, I'd like you all to look at this. Okay, I'll give you 10 seconds to look at this and count the number of F's in this. Okay, now, how many? 5, 7, 8, 6. I've got 5, I've got 7, I've got 8, I've got 6. 6, 9. Okay, so we've got 5, we've got 6, we've got 7, we've got 8, we've got 9. Count again. Let's take your time and count. Okay, 1, 2 with final, 3 with off, 4 with off again, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 9 of them. It just shows you how easy it is to miss things, isn't it? Because some people were very certain that it was 6. Other people were certain it was different numbers. So intellectual humility, understand that you will not always be right. And if you got it right this time, it doesn't mean that another time you may not get something wrong. It just means that somebody has noticed something that you perhaps might not have noticed. Why, again, let's talk a little bit more about humility. Sometimes things come on the blind side of you. You don't really notice what could be. You know, there's a story about some blind men who were touching an elephant, and some people touched the stomach of the elephant and said, oh, it feels like a wall. Another person touched the leg of the elephant and said, oh, the elephant feels like a tree. Another person touched the tail of the elephant and said, oh, it feels like a very small snake. It depends on the perspective that you're looking at. And it's always helpful to understand that other people may see things that you might not see. And humility becomes important because you are willing to put aside your thoughts to consider the thoughts of other people. It also means you are somebody who is more likely to want to understand evidence and take that evidence into account. So how do you become a bit more modest? How do you become a bit more humble in terms of your intellectual thinking? Because I'm sure you're all very bright students. Number one, learn to acknowledge when you are wrong. Sometimes some people don't want to hear that they are wrong. Learn to acknowledge when you are wrong because you are not always right. Number two, ask a lot of questions. Be curious. Be intellectually curious. Ask questions. Somebody tells you something about something you haven't heard before. Don't dismiss it as bogus or rubbish. Ask questions. It may be bogus or rubbish, but at least listen to it, test it first before you discard it. Also get feedback from people. When you do anything, ask people, Charlie, how did I do? Was I good? Where did you think I fell? I didn't do well. Because you can't always see yourself. You are blind to certain aspects of yourself, but other people will see things that you yourself may not notice. And then, if you're a leader, get your team to be involved by asking them questions. Don't assume that you know everything. I have been running the lab for 19 years now, and I realized that I have to step away from being the leader that I was 19 years ago, who knew everything and told everybody, guys, do this, to being the kind of leader now who asks my team, okay, so what do we do in this situation? What suggestions do we have? What do you think about it? Because no one person is a custodian of all wisdom. Everybody knows something you don't know. Like my house help had the remedy for the ringworm. Gratitude. When you say thank you, it reinforces that feeling of humility. When you say thank you to somebody, what you are saying is that I appreciate you. You are bringing me something that I don't have. You appreciate other people's input into your life. So when you say thank you, you become a more humble person. And more humble people are also more likely to say thank you. So I'll leave you with this quote by Lao Tzu, one of the Chinese philosophers, just for you to reflect on. And remember to subjugate yourself so that you may rule. Should I leave you a minute to look at this? All streams flow to the sea because it is lower than they are. Humility gives it its power. Now we have time for a few questions before your quiz starts. Is there anything somebody would like to contribute, or a question somebody would like to ask?
Please, do we have any questions? Our mentor is here to answer
You can ask a question about anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be directly related to this. But if there's any thoughts you have around this general topic that you'd like to make a contribution on, please feel free. Or you'd like to ask a question on.
You can raise your hand and the mic will come to you if you have any questions.
Okay, so then I will say thank you very much, and I wish you all the best. I hope you get through. I actually hope Motown wins, but anyway, I hope you all get through at least to the final round. God bless you all.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth Irene Beatty, thank you. I hope that you have been inspired this morning and you are poised to do more with the science, more with the English.
Oh.
And I want to mention that mentorship sessions for Nsmq 2019 are sponsored by GOIL. GOIL is our sole sponsor for Nsmq mentorship sessions 2019. So all the best to all the schools competing this morning, and see you again tomorrow. Thank you.
Here's innovation from GOIL that takes you further. New GOIL Super Synthetic 5W20 and 5W30 lubes have been expertly crafted with the latest in liquid engineering technology, highly advanced for modern engines, prolongs oil change intervals, save you fuel, clean, protect, and enhance engine performance. The way engines work has become complex, and GOIL has innovated to stay ahead with expertly crafted lubricants that work excellently with all petrol and diesel engines of today. New GOIL Super Synthetic 5W20 and 5W30 lubes. Innovation that takes you further. GOIL. Good energy.